She quits as an MP now, and even if she was the wrong prime minister at the wrong time, all of her successors impressively prove that she will be missed in the House of Commons. As I reported on already last week, Theresa May sat where she has always sat in the House of Commons for 5 years, in the middle of the government benches, right at the top of the stairs, first place in row 3. It was the first Prime Minister's questions since she announced her withdrawal at the next election, and because they are something of a weekly main performance in the British Parliament, it was the first opportunity for the Prime Minister to pay tribute. But Rishi Sunak said nothing, not a word to May, and it's now fitting with her long, impressive, contradictory career that it was not her own party leader who paid tribute to her, but Keir Starmer, the opposition leader. Starmer said he wished her a pleasant and well-deserved retirement and that she had always served this house with a sense of duty. And May smiled. It looked like she was touched. Theresa May has been a Tory MP for Maidenhead, a good 50 kilometres west of London, since 1997. She has been parliamentary group leader, party leader, Home Secretary and Prime Minister. May announced in her local newspaper, the Maidenhead Advertiser, that she no longer wants to run in the next election, like 61 other Tories so far. Now she said she feels like she can no longer devote the time and dedication she needs. And when you talk to employees and MPs, you often hear how pleasant May is to deal with personally, so friendly, so down to earth. And May's career was anything but conflict-free, though. As Home Secretary from 2010 to 2016, she supported the thesis that an anti-migrant atmosphere prevents so-called illegal refugees from fleeing to England and thus destroys the business model of traffickers. She had small trucks drive through several London neighbourhoods where people with a migrant background lived, predominantly with posters that read, "Illegal in the UK? Go home or face arrest." And there are several similar examples. In a speech at the party conference, for example, she falsely claimed that the expulsion of an asylum seeker had failed because the legislation was too soft because he had a cat as a pet. All of this rightly earned her a lot of criticism, but also approval from the hard right wing of the Tories. In a recent podcast, May said she regretted some of what happened back then, especially the pickup trucks were a mistake. Even beyond the party, many people look back less on May, or with little respect, but the hardliners in the Home Secretary. She was a Remainer and the wrong Prime Minister at the wrong time, as we all know. It is these 3 years from 2016 to 2019 that will shape the historical image of Theresa May, when she fought desperately and failed resoundingly to bring order to the chaos in British politics after the decision to leave the EU. The fact that she made Boris Johnson Foreign Secretary in the belief that she would get her biggest adversary under control would prove to be one of her many misjudgments. And since her tearful resignation in July 2019, the anger towards May and the party has at least subsided, which is also due to her successors. While Boris Johnson was banished from Parliament after a few too many lies, Liz Truss travels the world as a crazy conspiracy teller, and Rishi Sunak allows himself to be pushed around by the right wing. Theresa May stoically and all the more confidently takes her seat every Wednesday where she always does sit. Sometimes when she goes up the stairs, one of her colleagues is already sitting there in the first seat on the bench in row 3, but when she gets to the top, the seat is always free. But let's talk again about her current successor I quickly mentioned. The so-called Rwanda Act is being negotiated again in the British House of Commons, and that fits with May's policy as Home Secretary. Prime Minister Sunak wants to deport the first asylum seekers to Africa soon, and some lords are trying to prevent this. And when it comes to asylum seekers, the 91-year-old Lord Dubs easily gets angry. The British government's plan to send refugees to Rwanda is shameful and damages Great Britain's good reputation, he says. Alfred Dubs knows what it feels like to leave family and home behind, because at the age of 6 he himself took the Kindertransport from Prague to London to escape the Holocaust. And today he sits for the opposition Labour Party in the House of Lords and advocates for refugees. So far, the Lords have refused to pass the so-called Rwanda bill, thereby delaying it, among other things because it violates international law. But in the end, they will give in, as Dubs estimates, since the Conservatives were the largest group in the upper house. And the fighting spirit of the mostly older Lords would be weakening by now. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has made it a priority to stop the boats, and almost 30,000 people crossed the English Channel last year, mostly in small rubber boats. They and all the other refugees who have reached the country irregularly since the beginning of 2022 could soon be threatened with deportation to Rwanda. Regardless of their origin and without checking their asylum application, they should be transported to the East African country and then submit their asylum applications there instead of in Great Britain. 2 years ago, Boris Johnson was the first Prime Minister to charter a plane that was supposed to bring a small group of refugees to Kigali, despite violent protests from many human rights organizations. The British have already transferred £140 million to Rwanda, but so far not a single local refugee has set foot on Rwandan soil. The European Court of Justice thwarted Johnson's plan at the last minute, and the highest British court also initially declared the plan illegal because Rwanda was not a safe third country. The government has made improvements there and concluded a new agreement with the East African country in which the Rwandan state assures that no one will be deported to their country of origin. And Prime Minister Sunak argues that accommodating refugees in British hotels costs £6 million a day, and he hopes that the deportations from Rwanda will have a deterrent effect. If the law does not pass, even more people would lose their lives on the dangerous crossings, as the responsible minister, Lord Sharp, warned his colleagues in the House of Lords. The Lords should not stand in the way of the will of the people, appealed Sunak. He believes his tough asylum policy can score points with some voters. But will such a law really deter those seeking protections? Well, opinions differ here. Jacqueline McKenzie is a human rights lawyer in London who, among other things, represents an Iraqi who was supposed to be deported to Rwanda before the European Court of Justice prevented this in its emergency decision. The man was already sitting tied up in the bus on the tarmac with the plane in view, and the lawyer reports that it was traumatic for him. He has now been able to prove that he was a victim of human trafficking and is now allowed to legally stay in Great Britain. Mackenzie doesn't believe there will be a deterrent effect. We've been talking about Rwanda for years and people are still coming, she says. And Nikolai Posner isn't quite so sure either. He works for the French refugee organization Utopia 56 and is often in the northern French port city of Calais, where many migrants begin their risky journey. When the plan first became known 2 years ago, there were fewer crossings until the smugglers lowered their prices. That could be the case again now. Like many others who work in refugee aid, he also calls for more safe and legal escape routes. Those who venture on the dangerous journey from France to the southern English coast often have family in Great Britain, and most are entitled to asylum. They come from countries where war or persecution is commonplace: Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, and the vast majority of applications have so far been accepted. If the law is passed in the coming days, there will still be uncertainty as to when the first flights to Rwanda could take off. Associations of civil servants are calling for further legal clarification because, in their opinion, the new regulations continue to violate international laws. The lawyer Mackenzie also assumes that the fight will continue in the courts. But Prime Minister Sunak seems determined to deport the first people as quickly as possible. He has made the issue of migration a top priority. If he has his way, it will only be a few days before the first plane takes off for Kigali. The thought sends shivers down Lord Dubb's spine, though. After all, Great Britain is one of the founding members of the European Court of Justice and a signatory to the Geneva Refugee Convention. He will continue to fight against the fact that his home country, which welcomed him so generously as a child, is now setting such a bad example, and he will fight it as best as he can. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.